Okay, so this problem looks at, we have the area of a rectangle, and we know some things about the length and the width of this rectangle. We'd like to figure out how long and how wide this rectangle is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I know the area is 65 square yards. And I know that this has some kind of length L and some kind of width W. Now the trick is we want to be able to set up an equation to solve for this L and W. And what this typically will boil down to is it'll boil down to getting a quadratic equation that you have to factor and then solve. So what it says here is it says the length of the rectangle is 3 yards less than double the width. So this is the key statement in the problem. So the length is going to be 3 less than double the width. So I'm going to double the width, and I'm going to take 3 away from it. So now this is good because what it does is it has the width is W, and now the length is 2W minus 3. So they're the same variable. We like when there's one variable. We dislike it more when there's 2 or more variables. So I know the area of a rectangle is its length times its width. So I can plug in what I know. I know the area is 65. And I know the length is 2W minus 3, but I'm going to make sure that that's in parentheses, and then I know the width is W. So this is the equation I have to solve to find W. Now it's a little involved. It goes back to dealing with the factoring that you did earlier in the course. So what I'll do is I will distribute this W. So I get 65 equals 2W squared minus 3W. And then now I have to solve this quadratic. So if you recall, to solve a quadratic, I'm going to get everything on one side. So what I get is I get 0 equals 2W squared minus 3W minus 65. Now what makes this problem really fun and kind of difficult is you have to factor with this 2 out in front. So if I look at factoring this, I'm going to try to factor it into 2 binomials. Now the first 2 spots have to FOIL to give you 2W squared. So that's 2W and W. There's not really other choices for that. The harder thing is these 2 spots have to multiply to negative 65, but when I FOIL it, it has to add to negative 3. So there are lots of ways to factor. It just depends on how you learn to factor in the beginning. So 65 has a couple different factorizations. Negative 65, the big ones are negative 13 and 5. And so what I can do is if I put negative 13 here and positive 5 here, this is the correct factorization. Now, how did I know that was the correct factorization? Well, if I check it, 2W times W is 2W squared. 2W times 5 is 10W. Minus 13 times W is negative 13W. Oh, 13, not 3. And then negative 13 times 5 is negative 65. So if I add these 2 in the middle together, I get 10 minus 13. That gets me 2W squared minus 3W minus 65, which is what I started with. So these are my factors. This is what I really care about. So looking at these 2 factors, then I can solve the problem. So if you have trouble with factoring, let me know. We can go over some of that, but look back on your factoring notes. However you factor, there are other ways to factor. Some of them say multiply the 2 and the negative 65 together. However you factor it is fine with me. So these 2 factors I have now, I have this guy here and this guy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them both equal to 0. So I have 2W minus 13 equals 0, and I have W plus 5 equals 0. So now I'll just solve those little equations one at a time. So I'll add 13. So 2W equals 13. And then I will divide both sides by 2. So W equals 13 over 2, which is 6.5. Now on the other one, I'm going to subtract 5, so I'm going to get w equals to negative 5. So I have two answers, but the good news is one of them is no good. That's negative 5. Negative 5 is no good because you can't have a width of a rectangle be negative 5. It has to be positive. So this has to be my width. So if I go over to my answer, I know my width w is 6.5. So I'll put 6.5 in there. So now I also have to find my length. Well, we find length by going way back to the top here when we said length was 2w minus 3. So I can just plug that in. Length equals, that's not good, length equals 2w minus 3, but length, remember, is 6.5. So that's length is going to be 2 times 6.5 minus 3. 2 times 6.5 is 13 minus 3, which is 10. So my length is 10. So that is the final answer, but here's a quick check. If I multiply 10 times 6.5, I better get 65. And I do. I will. So I would guess that getting here is not terrible, but factoring it can be tricky depending on how much experience you have with factoring. So try that. Let me know if it works out and if you have other questions about it.